Hello, everyone. A very good day to you. Let's give a couple minutes for people to sign up, and we'll start at 2 or 3 minutes past the hour. Thank you. I can see 38 people already signed up. Let's give it one more minute. See if we can go beyond 50. Good. It's 2 minutes past the hour. I think we can start. So again, a very good day to everyone. And a warm welcome to this Golden Design Rules webinar. I hope we find you in very good health and spirit. If we can move to the next slide, please. Yeah. So as you know, the competition laws are intended to preserve competition by prohibiting practices that restrict competition. So trade associations like ours can provide great benefits, but because they involve groups of competitors, such as some of you here today, working together on common industry issues, we are subject to the particular antitrust scrutiny. So it is the policy of the forum to comply with all applicable legal requirements, including all antitrust or other competition-related laws. That's why we show this antitrust caution in every meeting. So thank you very much, everyone. I know you cannot speak, but I assume you acknowledge it. So thank you. Now that we're safe, my name is Ignacio Gavilan. I lead the environmental sustainability pillar for the Consumer Goods Forum, and I'll be hosting you today on this webinar. Together with me, we have today 3 representatives from member companies: Ashley Seahall from Walmart, Alison Bramfitt from Nestle, and Anna Gallego from Henkel. And I will let them introduce themselves and the companies as soon as they have their chapters. So you have an overview of the agenda there. What I want everybody in 55 minutes to leave with is a clear idea on the Golden Design Rules, so clear that you're going to start implementing in your own organizations as soon as you go back. So the idea is to walk you through the why. Why do we have these Golden Design Rules? We'll give you an overview of the 9 of them and what companies and countries are doing to implement them. And because this is not all about theory, you will have 2 companies, Henkel and Nestle, actually explaining to you how they've implemented or are in the process of implementing them within their organizations. So we can move to the next slide. Some of you are not that familiar with the CGF, so let me give you a quick word about the organization. This is a CEO-led organization that helps the world's retailers and consumer good manufacturers to basically collaborate alongside other key stakeholders in the industry to basically secure consumer trust and drive positive change in the industry. We're a do tank, and we take pride in our ability to produce a range of toolkits, of guidelines, manuals, case study booklets, all of it to help you as members implement the key commitments, including those on plastic, and participate in action-led initiatives like our coalitions of actions that I will explain in a minute. So that's the board of directors is parity based, so you will see an equal number of retailers and manufacturers. Some of the brands are very familiar to you, so we have this luxury of having all these top brands within the Consumer Goods Forum, as you will see from there, mainly food and beverage, beauty and hygiene products. So if we move to the coalitions of action, so in 2020, our strategy to help accelerate this collective impact of our members became focused on the creation, the drive, and the commitment of our coalitions of action, 8 of them. These groups or coalitions have been developed to change our ways of working and to improve implementation roadmaps and governance models from the past that was resolution based. Although coalitions of action will not change the topics being addressed, you have them in there. Deforestation, plastics, food waste, health, food safety, sustainable supply chains, product data and forced labor, all of them very relevant to the industry. So if we keep moving, that's our coalition of action on plastics. As you will see, good representation, 40 members, most of them headquartered in Western Europe and North America, but we have some representatives from Latin America, Asia Pacific, etc. So if we keep moving, so obviously, you'll be wondering why plastics, right? So what's the stake and why are we coming together as the packaged consumer goods industry? So we all know we have a problem with plastic waste. We in the FMCG sector are in a very powerful position to deliver impactful industry-led solutions to help ensure that no plastics end up in nature, which is the real problem here. And we need this collaborative action through the coalition of action. And this coalition is in a formidable position to help drive change on the plastic waste challenge and towards a circular economy, given a number of factors, right? The scale of the issue is clearly global. We have a very direct and visible association with it. There's a desire from many governments to raise funding for new waste handling facilities. There is a risk of significant cost impacts to the industry. There is a growing focus on the social and economic trouble that waste pickers might represent in some areas. One thing that is for sure, not for this coalition, but for all of them, is the absolute inability of any of our members to solve this issue alone. No matter how big you are, this requires collective action. And of course, on the positive side, there's a number of opportunities that can arise from the recovery of raw materials, the end of life of plastic in this particular case, right? So in 2018, the CGF board endorsed the Ellen MacArthur Foundation vision for a new plastics economy, and we've continued to work with them since then. So moving to the next slide. That's basically the recipe, right? Less and better plastic and a better system. If you focus on the 2 first ones, those are pretty much within our control. So this is objective compared to some of the other initiatives like deforestation or data where you have to influence others. This is within our control. The system we can influence, but less and better plastic is something that we can do ourselves. And that's one of the reasons we created these golden design rules. So if we move to the next one, as a coalition, we have developed a strategy that supports our objectives of collaboration and circularity, inspired again by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation New Plastic Economy. These goals are embodied in our central aims for members to take action on the design and use of plastic packaging, the development of waste management systems, and the introduction of recycling innovations that can support greater recycling efforts. So we're committed to basically three things in here. Number one is implementing a small number of very impactful golden rules on packaging design. We will talk about that for the rest of the webinar. Number two is aligning on principles for optimal extended producer responsibility schemes, which will help individual members with their government engagement approaches. We're not a lobbying organization, but there's some degree of advocacy that we can do in different areas. And of course, you guys have corporate affairs teams in Brussels and Washington in your respective geographies. And the third element is engaging with stakeholders to ensure broad support for advanced chemical recycling, and sending a very strong signal to the upstream suppliers about this topic. So I think I'll stop here and pass it on to Ashley, who will get us started on the specifics of the Golden Design Rules. I'll come back at the end for the Q&A. Thank you very much. And Ashley, floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ignacio. And it's nice to be with you all today. My name is Ashley C. Hall, and I'm Director of Sustainable Packaging for Walmart. As some of you might know, I go by Ashley C. Hall because there are many Ashley Halls that work at Walmart. It's a big company. I am the co-lead for the design working group within the Plastics Waste Coalition of Action. And to build off what Ignacio said, as we think about how do we use less plastic, and better systems, those first two areas about less and better plastic really come back to design and how do we think about that. And for those of you who are in the packaging space, you know that when people ask the question, well, how do you, what's the best for a certain package? The answer is almost always, it depends, because packaging can be really confusing and really challenging. And there's all these tiny details that can really make or break if a package is recyclable or you can use recycled content or what have you. And so there really was this need for convergence in terms of answering that question. What does good look like? Where can we use less plastic? And do so in a way that will not negatively impact the product. Because of course, packaging serves to protect the product. How can we pull together best practices from around the world to say, if you design a bottle using X, Y, and Z and avoiding A, B, and C, you are most likely not going to have contamination, and therefore it's going to be able to be recycled. It's going to be able to have higher value in the system and therefore less likelihood of becoming waste. And so that's what this group essentially has been working on. It's pulling together experts from around the world, including folks like Ceflex and RAP, Michigan State University, the Association of Plastic Recyclers, WWF, and many, many more, to say, what are those best practices across the majority of plastic packaging, and how do we really boil it down to the most important critical aspects so that we can help send a signal to say, if you design it this way, you're really helping us towards this mission of better and less plastics. And while the design work has focused primarily on recycling and reduction, it would behoove me not to mention that recycled content is critical. And while that's not specifically outlined in the Golden Design Rules, it's an important thing to know. Many companies have very ambitious goals around recycled content. And with that, we're all struggling to find enough material to be able to meet our goals. There simply is not enough. And while some elements of that is getting more people to recycle and to improve that infrastructure, another critical element is making sure that, again, the packaging that is created is best suited to become another material again. Let's go to the next slide. So the Golden Design Rules have been created to identify a range of different challenges, from improving PET bottles to removing problematic materials that are across many different packaging types, to making sure that we're properly labeling packaging so it's easy for customers to know what can and can't be recycled. I won't go through each of these here. They're available publicly on the CGF website for more information. But the work here is really addressed to find, what are those big impact areas where change can happen? Because I can tell you, Walmart personally, we developed a recycling playbook for our markets, and it's over 80 pages long. And that's like how we were able to really trim it down. And so CGF has taken it a step further and said, but make it even more tight. And so if you're going to focus on anything, or if you're going to celebrate anything in terms of the work you're doing to reduce or change your packaging, these are the areas to really focus on because they're going to make the most impact. Next slide. So with the Golden Design Rules, we really worked to make sure that the majority of plastic was captured. And you can see here on the right-hand side, the different types of products or product packaging that are addressed by the Golden Design Rules. And this is done globally with a global mindset. Now, most of it is focused on packaging that consumers take home with them, but some of it also does represent business to business work. And I would be remiss if I didn't say the importance of designing packaging, and this work is that, especially for brands and retailers, this is the area that we control the most. We can't control if a customer puts something in the recycling bin. We can't control if a local government decides that they want to change what is or isn't recycled. But we can decide how packaging is designed and shows up on the shelves for those customers. And so that's really the empowerment that we have here in these Golden Design Rules, is that this is where we can make a difference. Next slide. And one of the biggest questions that we always get, at least I do, is, so what is recycling? And as Ignacio mentioned, many of the members of the Plastics Waste Coalition of Action are also members of Ellen MacArthur Foundation's global commitment, Walmart included. And EMF has a very specific definition of recycling, which is that it has to be designed so that it actually goes into the recycling stream effectively and can be used as another material, and that it's recycled at scale, meaning 30% of the material is recycled, 400 million people have the ability to recycle it. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's this thinking that, oh, well, maybe it's technically recyclable. Maybe I can just say anything can be recycled. And so these Golden Design Rules are really critical to ensure that people understand that where the industry is heading, where commitments and governments are heading in terms of what does design mean. And so again, if you're looking for the biggest bang for your buck in terms of understanding what does design for recycling mean, the Golden Design Rules hit on the biggest areas. And so if you're part of the global commitment for Ellen MacArthur, I strongly encourage you to look at this information. And if you're not, and you're not already participating in the Golden Design Rules, I recommend that you take a look at them because there's real power in this space. Next slide. There are over 34 companies globally who have signed up for at least one of the Golden Design Rules. Walmart, we've signed up for all of them, and there are many companies who've done the same. And so it's exciting to see how many companies are already participating, but there's more opportunity here to grow the commitments around the Golden Design Rules. So again, celebrate if you are a company who's already engaging. Share the successes you're having in implementing. And if you haven't engaged or you're curious if your company has or what they've signed up for, take a look inside. And then there's always opportunity to join and participate. Next slide. So as we think about the approach for accelerating design, it really goes back to embedding and implementing the golden design rules. There's been plenty of documents that have been created and recommendations, and they will all gather dust if we don't actually take them and use them. And so that's the work we have moving forward. The golden design rules have been developed. So how do we make sure that companies who committed are showing up and showing the change that's taking place? So ensuring reporting on the progress, making sure that those changes and stories are shared. Next slide. And how do we get more adoption in implementation? So there's already a number of countries, as you can see here, including Canada and China, who have done a fantastic job at implementing the golden design rules. If you are involved in other work across the globe and you think the golden design rules would be a great way to engage, I encourage you to talk to those organizations because there's more power when we're able to show that consistency across different countries can really make an impact. And so I believe I'm passing it over now to Anna from Henkel to talk about the work that has been going on for them in terms of implementing. Anna, over to you.
Thanks, Ashley. So hello all, my name is Ana Paula, but you can call me Anna. I'm heading globally the packaging development from Henkel side. And then today I would like to share a little bit of thoughts on how we are doing to implement internally and how to embed the golden design rules. But first, before I go to that, is really to share with you all, if you are not aware still, what is our package ambitions towards 2025. So we have established what we call the 150-0 strategy, where we look for really 100% recyclable and reusable, and all of our packages are designed for that. Then we also understand how we reduce the plastic and the fossil-based plastic by 50%, and also how we have the zero waste. And here you can see on the strategy how this is gonna go through the circular economy itself. And for that, we truly believe that design is a very much powerful tool. So that's why golden design rules could really help us to support and deliver everything that we are putting here now. If you go to the next slide, you can see how effectively we are doing this to talk about the golden design rules to our teams, R&D, but even beyond. Okay, so basically, I have structured here in 3 key steps we are taking. So first, how we promote internally golden design rules awareness and beyond R&D. Okay, so naturally R&D is heading and is accountable for the design decisions and even talking to the suppliers, but even we are making global webinars with other group of people that we consider as key decision making in terms of design. And here we're talking about marketing teams, we are talking about purchasing teams, and even our corporate functions that is talking about sustainability outside. So this is the thought for all of you, like try to talk not only the R&D teams, but also across your organization to ensure that when we are thinking on design together from an end-to-end perspective, we are thinking based on the rules that are going to allow us to be recyclable. Then how we link it what on Ashley said, how we link and how we highlight the priority countries. Okay, so when you are in the cross-sector discussions, associations, how we share the golden design rules. Second thing, it's internally how we understand our design strategy and our priorities. So how in Henkel we are mapping what we have in terms of portfolio globally, where we are using the golden design rules to understand and see what are our current gaps. So together with the group of people that I just said, between R&D, even with the partnership of the suppliers, but also in our marketing teams, how we can cover these gaps, how we can overcome them, and what are the priorities looking towards 2025. And not only looking for the situation of the portfolio of today, how we change the future. So how we ensure that our innovation is being designed following the golden design rules, okay? And the third thing is we do not only look for the process itself, so how we really embed these in our operating models and make people aware, but we also understand and how we show collectively that we are driving action through real launches. And here you have some examples that the launches that we have done already in line with the Golden Design rules, as an example, the non-carbon black, but as well some recent design launches that we did, as the Mono P refill pouch with our pre-brand, but also when you are looking even from some secondary packaging or shelf packaging, as the example that I have here from a glue. Okay, so we move it from the PS to our PET tray. It's still not yet ideal because we still have some challenge and we still have a colored RPET tray here, but at least we are making step by step towards what we look that is gonna be the design for the future. Okay, and now I hand over to Alison also to share a little bit how Nestle is doing it.
Thank you very much, Anna. So yes, thank you very much for having me to talk here about what Nestle is doing in terms of implementing the Golden Design Rules internally. Let me introduce myself. So Alison Bramfit, I'm the Global Packaging Sustainability Manager in the ESG packaging team for Nestle. I want to talk to you today and a couple of examples of what we've actually done actively within our packaging, focusing on downsizing our packaging and using only what we need to use within the packaging that we have. So some examples of this would be reducing the headspace of the packaging, also removing secondary packaging where possible, or eliminating unnecessary or problematic materials, which is what I'm going to focus on this slide. The first example to share with you links to the Golden Design Rules 2. And here we have an example from Egypt, where we've eliminated, where we've eliminated the plastic overwrap on the cap for Nestle Pure Life Waters. The plastic tear-offs that cover the bottle cap and neck were removed, and they had been there from a point of view of the consumers understanding that the bottle had not been opened. But we needed to consider how do we communicate to the consumers how to also identify that the bottles had been unopened. So we communicated on the bottle, if it clicks, it's safe. And we communicated this so they could listen for the click when the bottle cap is twisted. So we found a way of also communicating to drive that confidence for the consumer in terms of what they're purchasing. That has enabled us to reduce nearly 240 tonnes by removing that tear off. And the material's also on the problematic list within the Golden Design Rule. The second example I'd like to share with you is on elimination. So here we've got an example from the US on the Gerber baby food product that we have within our portfolio. Within this product, we currently, or in the past packaging solution, we had both a cap and also a membrane on the top of the tub. And we did some evaluation with the consumers on the use of the overcap, and we're able to actually eliminate this overcap from the Gerber first food and second food puree tubs. And this enabled us to remove 2,300 tonnes of plastic annually. So on to the next slide. So we're committed to putting our size and scale at work in our transformation as we move forward. We also have the Institute of Packaging Science set up to accelerate the development of the new and better packaging for our portfolio. Within that institute, we have 50 scientists who are really driving cutting edge research. And we've worked really closely with suppliers on Golden Design Rule 6, increasing the value of flexible packaging. And here we have evaluated solutions to decide on what to scale up with suppliers. We're engaging and incentivizing our suppliers to make the move to monomaterials. And this is really important. You know, we need to be working collaboratively up our supply chain in terms of how we need to move forward with the materials within our portfolio. A great example of this when it comes to flexibles is on the Gerber mono material, which we designed for recycling in a baby food pouch format. And there were other great examples that we've implemented over the last year. It's really important as us as a brand that we need to be part of the solution. We know that our products have specific requirements in terms of safety and quality. And when we move forward in terms of paperization or the move into monomaterials, it does make a change in terms of some of those protective properties. And we really need to be mindful of that and also guide our suppliers in terms of what our real requirements are for our packaging and truly understand those so we're not over specifying our packaging. We're therefore also working to accelerate innovative packaging solutions across each of our product categories and therefore developing fit-for-purpose solutions. Many solutions are fit for purpose, but not one solution is fit for every purpose, and it's really important that we consider exactly what's required within our packaging to make the right choice in terms of what material we can use as we move forward. On to the next slide. So following our commitment in 2018 that all of our packaging would be recyclable or reusable by 2025, we aligned the business behind what we required to achieve this. This was done through 2 voluntary actions internally. We created an internal set of golden design rules for each market and category to follow. Today, this guideline is very well aligned with the Consumer Goods Forum golden design rules. And also we created the Nestlé negative list, which is shown here, which indicates the business priorities for removal to 2025. The negative list highlights problematic materials and provides a roadmap on how we remove these globally. These materials will be removed to align with the Consumer Goods Forum Golden Design Rule 2. And there's also voluntary commitments backed by detailed plans and clear milestones, enabling the business to kind of really measure our progress as we move forward. So really looking at how together we can move forward to meet our 2025 target. We've also looked at how we embed this within the business. So not only having the guidelines available for the business, but also looking at how we train all employees within this. So we've trained over 290,000 employees on packaging sustainability, which includes both the negative list and the golden rules, including the guidelines and other elements of understanding the infrastructure, as well as understanding the materials that these guidelines enables. And that is ensuring that they are aware and they can be considered as we're moving forward with developing the packaging in the different categories. And this helps us to make sure we're developing the right packaging for the future. And I hand back over to to you. Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you for the examples of your own companies and how the process is flowing in there. So now, what can you do? So if you're listening here, and I have approximately 70 people, so you must, now you know about the golden design rules. You have all the detail in the webpage, and we can talk about and you can ask as many questions as you want. But what can you do as part of the industry to accelerate adoption and implementation? So 2 things in here that we want to highlight at an individual level. So you and your company. First of all is understand the golden design rules and commit to implement 1 or more if you can. And then the tricky part, which is to integrate them into your internal packaging design guidelines. So that you can do tomorrow. Number 2, at a collective industry level, within your region, within your country, share them. Go to your industry, to your chamber of commerce, brag about them, show them off. It's there, it's for the public, it's already developed. You don't have to overthink it. It's already there. So share with them. This is all about collective action. This is all about scale. So we need more companies to implement them, to make this the norm rather than the exception, right? And then obviously support the acceleration of them at a country level to increase harmonization if possible. So those are the 2 things that you could do tomorrow. Needless to say, you have our emails and you know how to find us. If you're struggling with anything, whether it's technical or any of the implementation issues that might come up, please let us know. you have the 9 golden design rules in there. On the web, you will find information from each of them. So now we have 25 minutes. Speakers are so efficient. My God. Good. So we have 25 minutes for a Q&A. And I see there's already a question. But before I go into the questions, some of the folks from the audience might be wondering, okay, this is all very nice, but selling this to my management, blood, sweat, and tears. So the process I have to go through with my marketing team, with my research and development, with my finance department in the middle of this sort of inflationary environment. Is there anything you guys can share from your respective organization, the three of you, that might help the audience understand how to really pitch this? And ideally, this is a CEO-led issue, right? CEOs understand it, is the way forward. I cannot continue having unnecessary plastic packaging within my portfolio. But if someone is listening to this and has to pitch it to a management that is not familiar with it or is not yet a priority, any recommendation you guys will give to them? In no particular order, you can.
I'm happy to start.
Good.
So, you know, at Walmart, we're always thinking of everyday low price and everyday low cost for our customers. And, you know, you might be surprised to know that not all packaging changes cost money. In fact, as we think about getting rid of plastics wrapped around plastics, that can save money. So I wouldn't look at it just as an obvious, oh, this is going to cost me, but more this could save me and help my reputation. We've seen a number of studies that show consumers are paying attention and care about what their product is packaged in. It's no longer just about the product. And so you know, I would say take a holistic look at the golden design rules and do a gut check and talk to the CGF members. You know, we're all working towards the same mission here, which is to reduce plastics waste and to make sure that we're properly packaging our products. And so we're happy to provide feedback. And I can say things like removing PVC and these challenging materials. They aren't costing us more money for the most part. And again, there's a lot of opportunity here for just overall reduction.
Maybe I can add a couple of, oh, sorry, Anna. Okay, no worries. So I was going to add similar points to Ashley in terms of, you know, not always are the changes that we look to make put to align to golden design rules and on cost, so there can be savings, and obviously that can enable the business to make some savings. Also, I think it's around how do we connect in terms of that understanding to consumers. You know, we need to maintain, or there's a desire to maintain that any products that are sold are relevant for the consumers and maintain that. And as Ashley references, consumers are really engaged on this topic, and therefore there's an element of understanding the consumer base for any products and packaging of those products that need to be changed, and doing some consumer research that can help to support the business case, I guess, in terms of making any changes within the business. And finally, is also understanding in the country where you're looking to make the change, the impact on EPR going forward if your packaging is not recyclable or not kind of desirable, let's say, within that country. If it's not going to be fitting the system that they have in the country for recycling, then you know, the EPR regulations are changing and you will be penalised for that in the future. That certainly is coming. You can see that in Belgium. So kind of looking at some of these more advanced EPR systems and modelling how that could look in your country or into your business, I think could also help to kind of make that move at an earlier point.
Yeah. And I would say, like, maybe the last additional point, I completely would agree with everything that have been said. But also, if you look today, like how many guidelines or how many rules we have externally, and something that when we were doing not only R&D discussions, but as I mentioned, like marketing discussions were very much appreciated, how the rules are very much clear. So when you talk about the rules, you see like there is a top line overview to see how we move forward, how this is clear, even from a non-technical people. And when we are selling this internally, they would see, okay, makes sense, is an easy way for us to advocate internally, is an easy way for us to advocate externally, and is not a very clear path for us to look our roadmap. So I think that's how also we were selling, not only for, again, for the design people, that it's really like changing the design itself, but also from our key stakeholders to understand the value internally and externally of how these golden design rules can help us.
Super. Thank you very much to the three of you for sharing those examples. And thank you, Alison, for bringing up the EPR. That reminds me, the CGF published very recently a paper on eco-modulation, that it's in the webpage. I know it's not the sexiest word but it's very important, and it's something that is coming. So for those of you interested, there's an eco-modulation paper.
Ignacio, can I speak to that? Because
Sure.
I actually think eco-modulation is exciting because if we're talking about how we save money, that's a really great space that I don't think enough companies are taking advantage of. So I think this is happening in many companies, even in Walmart at times, right? So you have the compliance team, the ones that are filling out and handing this whatever forms or data is needed for the countries, and they're the ones working on, okay, what's this going to cost me? And then you have the design teams and the marketing teams who are saying, okay, we need to do this and that and this and that, and they don't always connect and see that how we design and market our products can cost us additional money if we're not designing it to meet these policies. And so do take a look at that eco-modulation page, because you might find some cost savings there, and it's the right thing to do, to help the environment.
And it's a very good point on bringing departments that traditionally don't talk to each other to the table. Yep. Okay, so we have a few questions from the audience. The first one: are you seeing a role for compostable and biodegradable in your packaging strategies? Anybody?
So I can, yeah, I mean, compostables are definitely something that a number of companies are looking at in terms of developments in packaging. There is a lot of development going on in that space on packaging right now, so it's a space to watch for sure. When you look at the infrastructure in terms of compostability, and you try to already map out the recycling infrastructure, is even more complex when you try to map out the compostable infrastructure. And for sure, we need to ensure we're designing for the right infrastructure. So I think there's a piece of work to understand the infrastructure for sure in more detail. And then secondly, I think as well, when you're looking at different products where the food is integrally linked into the packaging, so it's very difficult for the consumer to remove. Examples such as tea bags, where you also verge on it being more a product maybe than packaging. I think absolutely there's definitely an area there where compostable, biodegradable materials have benefits. I think the development on the materials is still at an early step. It will be interesting to continue to watch in terms of how these materials can be used as we progress, up to the futures. But for now, I think that the main focus area is probably the beneficial when it's really connected to the product.
Yeah, from our perspective, we are actively looking for materials that could be incorporated back to the nature, but I agree with Alison said, the most important thing is understanding how this meets the composting standards from an international perspective, and especially also the recycling. So the recycling is definitely something we're taking as a priority, but we are open to investigate if this makes sense.
Yeah, to echo, if it's got food waste on it or food that can't be separated and makes a package non-recyclable, then composting is a solution to consider. But what is not, in our opinion, a solution to consider is bulky packaging that could be considered recyclable or could be a reusable option, and using it for composting. Because in addition to the fact that most areas don't have composting infrastructure, and there are some certifications on home composting, if you get a big package with a lot of bulky materials, it's going to take a very long time for that to compost and to, go away. And is the customer really going to keep huge amounts of material for composting and add it little by little by little? It's not going to happen. So we have to think about what's the customer experience as well. It sounds good. It sounds like it'll magically disappear, but that's not what happens. And biodegradable outside of composting, just using that term, be very cautious of that, because there's some regulations that say don't use that term. There's some things like oxo-biodegradables that are very challenging and just make microplastics. So, I would say first look at reduction, reuse, recycling, and then ultimately composting. And the last note I would say is there's work going on in organizations like the Closed Loop Partners Composting Consortium that are looking to say, are there certain types of product packaging that really best fits composting? Because what we don't want to see is some, for example, chip bag manufacturers move for a recycling solution and others move for a composting solution, and then the customer doesn't know what to do. They're like, wait, which chip bag goes where? Because if it's not as easy as it's a recyclable bottle, I put it in my recycling bin and it's that straightforward, it's just going to cause confusion. So the more data and again, convergence voluntarily that can take place, I think the easier it will be for waste systems in the future.
Good. Thank you everyone for the response, and thank you Ashley for reminding us that hierarchy. I think it's very, very useful. Good. So another question here. How do you manage the balance of customer perception on certain materials, so paper versus choosing the best super duper circular option on plastics?
I'll go for that first. You have to pay attention to what the customer wants. None of us are environmental NGOs. CGF is the closest as a trade association, but still, we sell products, right? And so we need to make sure that they sell. And a product or a package is not truly sustainable if it doesn't sell. And a great example of this is for us in our meat business. We've been trying to get out of expanded polystyrene meat trays with plastic wrap, and we've tried a range of different materials, including fiber, including rigid PET, et cetera, vacuum seals packed. And if the customer doesn't buy it because it doesn't feel familiar to them, or they don't accept it, it's not going to win. And so there's this balance, right? You want to make sure that you're doing the most sustainable option from a life cycle assessment and true end of life perspective. So not just cradle to grave, but thinking about the circularity of it. But you also need to bring the customer along, and you need to keep iterating. And if it doesn't work once, that doesn't mean it won't work a few years from now or 6 months from now. Concentrates years ago were tried and they didn't work well in the US. Now they're making a comeback because people are understanding the differences. So there's a fine balance here, but I would share, if you're trying things and they're not working, share your story. Don't just share your successes, share what hasn't worked as well, because it's important for governments and customers to understand that, it's not just on the manufacturers and brands and retailers. Everyone has to be engaged. If a customer doesn't buy it, then it's not going to sell. Same thing with reusables. If you make reusables, but people don't actually reuse it, it's not going to work. So it's all a balance, right?
Yeah. And maybe actually building to your point, I think what you're also bringing is the value of collaboration. And I think it's also very important that for us as designers to understand the context of the recycling stream that you're designing for. So it's very much important when they're looking for alternative materials, definitely consumer and the customers there, but also to understand and partner with the recycling streams, with associations in the region that you are, to understand what would be the challenge, how to innovate, how to move together towards that. So that's very much important to get learnings from a customer, from a consumer, but also to get learnings from the recycling stream. So collaboration with suppliers across the entire value chain, it's something that is very insightful if you want to learn more about it.
I only have one bill because I think the excellent points that have already been put forward in terms of answering this question. But I think when you talk about customer or consumer perception and our the way that we would phrase this, we also need to take them on the journey. Do you know, us as a brand, we can use our brands to really educate the consumer as well. And so we should make the right choice, as Ashley was saying, through looking at the science and making the right decision for the product to ensure it's doing the right functionality, it has the right protective properties. We're not creating food waste by making that change, and choose the right material. But then we need to educate the consumers to why we've done that and what the benefit of that is over the alternatives that they may see other companies using or elsewhere with other product categories. Why is that not suitable for this product category? So we can use our brands to do that. And we also need to use our brands to educate consumers. You know, as we're making these changes, how do they need to change? You know, it's a big step for a consumer to make a change from placing a flexible packaging maybe in their residual waste bin to actually doing something different, such as take it to store to recycle it. How do we use our brands to move that forward? So I think there's a really important role for brands as well.
Yep, absolutely. Good. Good question here on flexibles. Basically, it's asking about the next 5 years and for you as brands, given that more than 50% of your portfolio is made out of flexibles, what's coming up that will significantly change the whole system, because it doesn't today is very difficult to recycle. Any volunteers on this one?
I'll start. I feel like that student at the front of the class. Ooh, me. So, you know, we're looking, I think that's a really important point. Flexibles have a lot of positive benefits as we think about greenhouse gas emissions. And I think none of our companies are just looking in a vacuum of only plastic waste, right? We have to think about unintended consequences of greenhouse gas emissions and water use and all of it. So flexibles aren't going to go away. That said, we do know, and this goes back to the golden design rules, there are a number of flexibles that are used that are frankly just wasteful. Plastics wrapped around plastics where they don't really have to be. 2-packs, and I go talking about marketing, 2-packs that are put together with extra plastic. Does it need plastic? Can you market another way to say buy one, get one 50% off, or get a 2-pack, but they're each separate? So there are some things where you can just simply reduce. There's others where you can switch to a pure polyethylene, or in some companies, countries, a polypropylene, where it can be recycled at stores and at other locations. So Walmart, we follow the Ellen MacArthur Flexibles document that they just released earlier this year. I think it gives a really nice breakdown of ways to reduce, ways to substitute, ways to increase recycling. But there is still that big, what do we do with the stuff that's left? And I think that is where the conversation goes to chemical recycling and what does the future look like there? And that's why it's exciting to see in all of the different working groups of the Plastics Coalition of Action that we have a group on that to explore that. What's that going to look like? How will that impact things? So we don't have the answers, but I'd say these are the types of groups that come together and really think through that and say what might it look like if we lean in here or explore this there. So now I'm just rambling, so I'll stop.
And for the specifics of chemical recycling, also in our web, you will find published last month our position around that, right? So you'll find a vision and principles paper together with a life cycle assessment of one of the technologies, pyrolysis, compared to incineration. It gets very technical. There will be webinars about the topic, but just to make you aware that we are also discussing within the very same coalition the topic of chemical recycling. Any builds from Anna or Alison on?
I mean, flexible plastic recycling, it's the one we're watching. There's a lot of change that needs to come on flexible plastic recycling. There's loads of initiatives progressing, which is really beneficial to see. And specifically in Europe, we can see more of this development, I would say, than other locations when we look at a global picture. And I guess the one point I would say in terms of that, the question is quite right in terms of we can't control the local recycling systems. That's not in our remit, unfortunately. But often we can be part of an extended producer responsibility system. And there we need to look at what our role is in terms of advocacy to ensure that flexible plastics are included under EPR. And I think for me, that would just be the one point I would say. We could probably spend a whole hour talking about the flexible plastic infrastructure. And if you want more detail there, I would also advise to go and have a look at CFlex. And they have some data available now in terms of, certainly for members, I'm not sure if it's open data around different developments in different countries on infrastructure. But I just would stress the role that we can also play in terms of driving and supporting the right regulation in countries to enable the material to be collected and to enable that infrastructure to be created.
Excellent, thank you. There's we have 3 more minutes, but there's a good question around greenhouse gases and the switch to material. If you guys have done any analysis moving, for example, beverages back to glass, which is easier to recycle, of course, but the greenhouse gas, it's potentially higher. So any studies you have done on switching to another material from the greenhouse gas perspective?
We do. So we've worked with Systemic, who is also part of the CGF Plastics Waste Coalition of Action. We worked with them just as Walmart to do an analysis of our top plastic packaging types and what lever would be best suited for either reduction, elimination, substitution, recycling, etc. And what we found was there are some product types like bottles where it really, especially in the US or North America, it actually doesn't make sense to switch to glass unless you're going for a reuse model, because glass recycling is not as prevalent as plastics recycling for PET bottles and the amount of weight. But for reuse, it would be a great solution. We also, looking at other materials, found that if you are sustainably sourcing a fiber, and meaning it's either recycled content and or a mixture of certified virgin material, and it's roughly the same weight as the plastic that you're switching it from, then the greenhouse gases are not tremendously different. It is different if you don't sustainably source and there's no certification, because that could be leading to deforestation. And so from those learnings, the Walmart Foundation, which is our philanthropic arm, worked with Systemic and the Recycling Partnership to create a tool called Plastic IQ. It is free and is open, and you can type in the materials you use today and it will tell you what the greenhouse gas emissions would look like if you were to switch to an alternative material. So it's a very helpful tool that I would encourage folks to take a look at.
Any other reactions, Anna or Alison?
I would say like approach is very similar. So looking for the life cycle assessment when we are making it. And definitely the question is what is the role of the packaging here? So as Ashley said, it's not only about the type of the packaging, but again, reusability is very much important. So you need to understand what you're comparing with and how if you reuse, how much you reduce, but also what is the role of the product inside. So also there is a way that you even reduce dramatically, not only looking from the packaging, but from the full product. And getting back to the point from Alison, how the brand can educate consumer on the entire use. And then with these, definitely you can understand what is the path, what material makes sense, reusability, how you can educate, and then how can be properly discarded. So then definitely you can understand if there are greenhouse gases from that specifically. Comparison makes sense or not, and also considering your geographic scope, because this can also change, depends on the conditions you have from a global perspective.
Super. Thank you very much. And thank you to the three of you for a fantastic discussion today. I think, I hope the audience has learned about the coalition of action. Now you know that for us, through this strategy, we will define success as the broader adoption of these plastic packaging design guidelines, the Golden Design Rules, to ensure that the packaging is designed for a circular end of life. And then, of course, the progression of a number of good, sensible, fair APRs with robust collection and high rates of recycling around the world. So thank you very, very much to the three of you and to the audience, and wishing everybody a very good rest of the day. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.